How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Do you think you could be convinced to kill someone? How about yourself? Most people would answer no, right? Well then, how about this? What would you say to somebody to get them to do these things in your name? How would you make them believe that what they're doing is right, even when they know that they're breaking the law or hurting themselves? This is The Cult Vault, and welcome to the club. It's out of a morbid curiosity that I'm going to be looking into the stories and people from some of the most famous cults in history and finding out just how people have been convinced and coerced into committing terrible crimes and convinced into even killing themselves in the name of somebody else. Hello followers, and welcome to my podcast The Cult Vault. I'm Casey, and thank you for joining me today. Like many of you, I'm sure I have a fascination with things that I don't fully understand. Things that seem irrational or almost impossible to me. For a number of years, I've been interested in the psyche of serial killers, the unsolved mysteries of the world, and also, of course, cults. My own morbid curiosity has led me down these twisted paths, but I feel it's important for these stories to be retold to ensure that heinous acts from history aren't allowed to repeat themselves, and that the victims and families of those affected by these stories have their side told too. Each episode, it is my aim to explore a single notorious cult, stretching from the Manson family through to UFO cults and exploring groups that are now classed as religions in between. Delving into cult history, I hope to provide an in-depth insight into the minds and worlds of cult leaders and the members that have resided and sometimes still reside within them. When does a group become a cult? What really happens inside these social circles? Let's take a good look. Before we dive into our first cult account, I think it's important to establish some context. This week I'd like to talk about the history of cults, to offer a better understanding of the etymology of the word cult and how it became known in the way that we know it today. I think the word cult is difficult to define, especially because it wasn't always seen as a bad word. But once we've established some things, it should be easier to explore cults throughout history and to even look at groups that share characteristics of cults but aren't necessarily classed as evil. The word cult isn't always known to have negative connotations like it does today. Cult is derived from the Latin word cultus, which means to till, care for, and or cultivate. Throughout time, the word was often used when sacrifices, offerings, and statues would be presented to gods and deities. These offerings and the worship of these gods usually took place in temples, shrines, and churches. Eventually, any religious movement that is known as strange, unusual, or working outside of the mainstream religions would be classed as a cult or a sect. The definition of cult differs slightly today depending on what you're reading. The Oxford Dictionary says that a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. Likewise, the Cambridge Dictionary describes the word cult as a religious group often living together whose beliefs are considered extreme or strange by many people. Dictionary.com says a particular system of religious worship with reference to its rites and ceremonies. When I first read these descriptions, I felt like any of these explanations could be applied to most mainstream religions. Author Reza Aslan is quoted as saying, "Every prophet of every major religion can be considered a charismatic leader." He also says that the biggest joke in religious studies is cult plus time equals religion. It was only when I came across Professor of Sociology Janja Lalich's description of a cult that it made sense to me. She said, It's not really a belief system per se. It's about the behaviours of the group and the ways in which it uses various methods of influence and control to manipulate and exploit its members. Likewise to this, documentary series Explained and their episode titled Cults say that a cult is, quote, a group led by charismatic leaders with extreme beliefs and followers. This made more sense to me. This sounded like the definition of cult that I've come to know, the one that really grips my morbid attention. Examples of these charismatic leaders include David Koresh, Charles Manson, Marshall Applewhite, and these are just 3 names that easily fit into that category. Figures like these who would be responsible for causing the definition of cult to become something more derogatory throughout time, but not before the word would gain most of its negative associations after the Jonestown Massacre in 1978, where 918 members of the People's Temple were led by Jim Jones to their death by cyanide poisoning. This is the case that we will be covering in episode 2 of this podcast. But I'm still left with these questions. What characterises a cult? And why are some so successful in the destruction of thousands of lives? Janja Lalich says in the episode of Explained that there are 3 characteristics of a cult. Number 1, a cult is a group or social movement that is led by a charismatic leader who is authoritarian and who demands to be revered as a godlike figure. Number 2, the group will have some form of indoctrination program, sometimes called thought reform. And number 3, exploitation, either sexual, financial, some type of exploitation of its members. In order to understand these 3 steps a bit better, I did some quick research to find real-life examples and occurrences from cult members that fit into these 3 categories. So stay with me as I explain these 3 steps in more detail. Number 1, the charismatic leader who demands to be revered as a godlike figure. Former cult member Brielle Decker spoke to The Guardian about her time within one of the largest divisions of Mormonism, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Luckily, it is known as FLDS for short. She was the 65th wife of leader Warren Jeffs. She talks about, quote, being terrified on her wedding day to Jeffs. She says that they never consummated the marriage, but that Jeffs gave her some, quote, bad trainings, an FLDS euphemism for teaching scripture that often led to sexual acts that Jeff claimed were ordained by God. When chilling audio tapes of him teaching his wives how to please him sexually were entered into evidence during his trial, he referred to them as heavenly trainings. Sounds like somebody with a God complex, doesn't it?
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1, go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2, collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa Welcome Bonus.
Step 3, play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games, all for free?
Step 4, unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Looking into step 2, an indoctrination program often called thought reform. When I did some research into thought reform, I realised that the term also refers to brainwashing, mind control and coercive persuasion. A section of the Guardian article about Warren Jeffs reads, quote, a tall, slim man with dark eyes has been president and prophet of FLDS since 2002. Soon after he assumed the leadership, he began splitting families apart, taking young girls as his own brides and excommunicating members, mainly young men, from the church. He banned socialising as well as contact with the outside world. Jeffs, now 62, has around 80 women and children that he has wed over the years, though the state doesn't recognise these marriages. I look more at some of the indoctrination methods used by cults a little later on in this episode. And lastly, the third characteristic, exploitation. Looking again at Warren Jeffs, KUTV reports a woman identified only as RH as accusing Jeffs and other leaders of FLDS of carrying out a calculated plan to sexually abuse underage girls as part of, quote, religious rituals. According to a lawsuit RH brought against Jeffs, the abuse began when she was only 8 years old. In 2011, he began a life sentence for sexually assaulting 2 girls aged 12 and 14, whom he described as his spiritual wives. Now, I don't know about you guys, but with these 3 characteristics showing us what makes up a cult, I thought, wouldn't it be easy to spot a group like this? Surely, with this information, you can see a cult from a mile away. So how do so many people still find themselves in the clutches of a cult? The Explained documentary says, quote, "We present to you 7 elements that social scientists say can lead to indoctrination into a cult. Number 1, transition. When someone is going through a turbulent time with lots of changes, they are often more vulnerable than usual. This can sometimes be a time when people may be open to trying new things. I recently moved to a new neighbourhood, and soon after this, I had a baby. And I found myself looking for local baby and toddler groups, or knitting groups, or art and craft groups, or just something in the area that could fill my time and socialise me and the baby a bit more whilst my partner is still working. And it is often people moving to these new places and looking for groups to join that lead them to being indoctrinated into a cult. Cult Witness, a 2009 documentary that I watched on Amazon Prime, follows Samuel Stephan. At the age of 19, he was drawn into a cult. He talks about going through a crossroads in his life, asking existential questions like, where am I going with life and what is my purpose? And it was during this vulnerable mindset that he was manipulated into a small religious group. Stephan would spend 10 years of his life subjected to manipulation, exploitation, and violence before escaping through the woods in the dead of night. An article on Insider.com titled, "I Grew Up in a Cult and I Can Tell You Why Normal People Join," also offered some insight into the first stage of indoctrination. Fleur Brown shares what it was like to grow up as part of the Worldwide Church of God, a cult-like religious organisation. Brown says, quote, "When my mum lost her dad in her early 20s, she was looking for answers and a soft place to land," end quote. This was also during the 1970s, the Big Love movement, but also an era of uncertainty, with racial tensions at an all-time high and the Vietnam War. History shows us that many of these cult-like groups appear during times of turmoil. From all the research I've gathered, tragic times in history seem to be a breeding ground for groups to take advantage of the vulnerable. Widowed wives of war, traumatised soldiers, bereaved sons and daughters, people of colour living within the margins of society. Still, you may be looking for a soft place to land, but what solace can be found inside a cult? This is step 2, the soft sell. You're welcome into a new group with open arms and initially without judgment. Imagine you are grieving or hurting, or living in lonely circumstances and you're seeking friendship, or simply just some answers to life. You decide to go to a local group, and within this group, they tell you that they hold all of the answers to the questions that you have. And then you realise that every single person within this group is so warm, so friendly, sickeningly nice. They are inviting and they seem to be in sync with you. They share the same values and the same interests, and they make you feel instantly like you were destined to be part of this group and to find these people and have them as your friends. Fleur Brown goes on to say in her article, quote, "Anyone who had a brush with someone from our church, it felt like heaven on earth for new recruits, who were often battered and bruised by life's tribulations," end quote. She also mentions, quote, "The indoctrination process was the best part of being in the group. New people were intensely quizzed about their past, offered home-cooked meals and support around the home. They had their dance card filled with social events, love-bombed," end quote. You're hurting a lot, a small group offers a friendly hand. They may call you a few times a week, asking, "When will I see you again?" Or stop by your house and say, "Hey, I'm heading to the group, you want to come with me?" This is how people become part of something much bigger than they realise. And this is what leads to step 3, a new reality. You spend so much time within this self-sealing environment that anyone outside of this group is wrong with the ideologies that you now hold, and only you know what is right. It doesn't matter who argues with you outside of this circle. You don't want to listen to what they have to say. It seems at this stage everything you know and understand about the world is slowly stripped away with each moment you spend inside this group. Brown mentions how, quote, "birthday celebrations were the pinnacle of self-focus and were banned along with other pagan celebrations like Christmas and Easter. That caused me no end of embarrassment at school and kept me from forging deep connections with my non-church peers," end quote. So this is one small example of how slowly you become alienated from your friends and family that are not part of this group, and how you spend so much time with this group that only what they say and what they do seems to make sense and seems to be the only thing that matters. And this is where number 4 comes in. Number 4 is the dear leader. Anything they say goes. Anything they say is true. It's gospel and you believe it. The leader is the only person that can take you on this spiritual journey and give you the answers that you seek. John Turton, an ex-Full Gospel Mission member of Camp David, explains in the documentary How to Spot a Cult about the need for group members to get close to its leader. He says that we used to wash each other's feet, which was a humbling kind of thing to do to each other. You can imagine the effort and strive that people would go to be the one to wash his feet. And this particular woman, she was so desperate to wash his feet, and he'd already been done by somebody. He had his socks and shoes on. So he put his shoes and socks and everything straight into the bowl to protest at the same time as making a bit of fun of this lady. Imagine needing to be so close to somebody that you'd be willing to be made a joke of in front of a group of people, to stand up and face that kind of humiliation, to get down on your hands and knees and offer to wash somebody's feet just to have them protest in jest at your expense. But you can't walk away because of step 5, the enemy. By this point, the charismatic leader will be talking about the enemy, and every cult has one. With Jim Jones and the People's Temple, it was nuclear war. With Charles Manson, it was an apocalyptic race war. Using a common enemy within the group provides rhetoric to these charismatic leaders that can further instill fear and manipulation into their groups. Samuel Brosseau, former member of the 12 Tribes, explained, quote, "You're going to be raped, you're going to be beaten, you're going to be left in a ditch." He said all these horrible things about what would happen to me if I left because the world was such an evil place, end quote. So, if leaving a group means pain, torture, death, and being away from this charismatic leader who can take you to the utopia, isn't it inevitable that you'd want to remain in the arms and comfort of the cult leader? And if you decide to leave, or some of the ideals of the group don't sit well with you and you start to ask questions, then we move on to step 6, which is peer pressure. Everyone's experienced peer pressure at some point, right? The pressure to have an alcoholic drink before the legal age, or smoke this cigarette, or skip school with me for the day.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
After his 10 years of cult life, Samuel Stephan was chased through the woods on the night of his escape from his cult. He talks of how his pursuers were ordered to punish him, threaten him, and break his will again. Brielle Decker explains that her escape from Warren Jeffs has cost her the relationship of family and friends, and even 2 of her children who have disowned her for leaving. Peer pressure is quite a thing. A famous experiment by Solomon Asch, coined the Asch experiment, was one of conformity. He sat a number of participants in a room, and all of the participants were in on this experiment apart from one person. He showed all of them a piece of paper with 5 lines. There was 1 line on the left and 4 lines on the right. He then asked everybody in the room to tell him which line on the right out of the 4 lines was the same length as the line on the left. All of the participants pointed to the line that was clearly not the right answer. But under peer pressure, the one true participant who had no idea what was going on chose the same line as everybody else, knowing he was wrong. You could see it on his face that he was unsure and doubting himself, but under the peer pressure, he chose the same answer as everybody else. Again, this level of manipulation, of brainwashing and pressure, it starts to paint a true picture of how hard it must be to leave a cult or see through twisted ideology. Eventually, it may come to light that the leader of this group is number 7, a sociopathic narcissist. Laura Johnston Cole, a former member of the People's Temple, has quoted Jim Jones as saying, "You couldn't live with me, so since I'm dying, you're going to die too, end quote. And on that very fateful day, he led 918 people to their deaths in Jonestown before taking his own life with a gun. Stephen Hassan is a former cult member. He's an ex-Unification Church leader who became a member in the 1970s at age 19, but left after almost 3 years, and began describing to the world that recruitment into the church has, quote, unethical use of powerful psychological influence techniques by members of the church. Hassan is now an American mental health counsellor. He runs a centre for victims of cult mind control and is one of the world's leading experts on cults. He released his most famous text in 1988 called Combating Mind Control. He still releases texts to this day. Hassan has created what is known as the BITE model: behaviour, information, thought and emotional control. In each quadrant, he lists techniques used by cults to indoctrinate and brainwash its followers. By using this information, we can ascertain where a cult lands on the BITE scale and predict its impact and severity on members and the cult's level of control. Behaviour control includes promoting dependence and obedience, modifying behaviour with rewards and punishment, dictate where and with whom you live, restrict or control sexuality, control clothing and hairstyle, regulate what you eat and drink, deprive you of 7 to 9 hours sleep, exploit you financially, restrict leisure time and activity, and require you to seek permissions for major decisions. Information control includes deliberately withhold and distort information, forbid you from speaking with ex-members and critics, discourage access to non-cult sources of information, divide information into insider versus outsider doctrine, generate and use propaganda extensively, use information gained in confession sessions against you, gaslight to make you doubt your own memory, require you to report thoughts, feelings and activities, and encourage you to spy and report on others' misconduct. Thought control includes instill black versus white, us versus them, and good versus evil way of thinking. Change your identity, possibly even your name. Use loaded language and cliches to stop complex thought. Use hypnotic or trance states. Teach thought-stopping techniques to prevent critical thoughts. Allow only positive thoughts. Use extensive meditation, singing, prayer and chanting to block thoughts. Reject rationalising analysis, critical thinking and doubt. And lastly, emotional control includes instill irrational fears or phobias of questioning or leaving the group. Label some emotions as evil, worldly, sinful or wrong. Teach emotion-stopping techniques to prevent anger and homesickness. Promote feelings of guilt, shame and unworthiness. Shower you with praise and attention, also known as love bombing. Threaten your friends and family. Shun you if you disobey orders or disbelieve. And teach that there is no happiness or peace outside of the group. From this BITE model, we can gain a score which will determine the level of control the group is using. 1 to 10 is mildly dangerous and could lead later to lack of emotional development for its members. 11 to 24 is moderately dangerous and could lead to severe trauma or PTSD for its members. And 25 to 35 is severe and could lead to lethal or dangerous outcomes. If there's no grounds for cognitive dissonance, how are people supposed to think for themselves in these environments? It seems like it's a very strategic level of mind programming over a very long period of time that causes these people to be fully indoctrinated into these groups. It's not because somebody is weak-minded or they're not strong-willed. It's taking somebody who is in a vulnerable position and just using methodical regimes of mind control to make sure that this person doesn't have a chance to second guess, doesn't have a chance to breathe for a moment and have their head outside of this cult. How many people today are actually wrapped up within cult groups or sects? Well, Documentary Explained says, quote, "It is impossible to know how many cults are currently active because most cults insist they aren't cults and almost nobody in a cult realises that they are in one." So with that huge amount of information and history, I think we're probably in a really good position to start looking at some historical cult cases and being able to identify why they are classed as cults or how these people are indoctrinated into these groups. So I think we're going to leave this episode here today, but not before we take a brief look into what the world looks like today. With the internet, technology, and the new age, there are significant threats for cults to form. There's been recent mass amounts of scandals within the entertainment industry and rumours of sex cults alone. The conspiracy of Trump's presidency being a religious cult, and that's without even thinking or talking about all the historical cults we know about. There's political, financial, sexual, and online cults forming all around us. And UFOs have an entirely separate subcategory labelled UFO cults. I think it's safe to say that we'll have plenty of content to keep us going and keep us busy for a real long time. And if anybody has any suggestions of cults we should cover, then please get in touch. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you look forward to the next episode. We're going to be diving deep into the psyche of Jim Jones and the events that led to the infamous massacre in Jonestown. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. If you find yourself in a cult or know someone who might be, please follow the link in the description for more information on how to get advice and support. If you would like to send me an email, you can on cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter @cultvaultpod. Find me on Reddit @cult-vault. Find me on Facebook at The Cult Vault. Find me on YouTube, Tumblr, Instagram @Cult Vault Podcast. I'm Casey, and thank you so much for listening. One last thing before I go. I would like to say a massive thank you to my good friend Meg for drawing up the cover art for this podcast. I know it's probably going to raise some controversial issues with the swastika, but it is just a reference to Charles Manson. And considering that this podcast is all about cults, I think it's an awesome piece of cover art. It's a small nod to those who in this community will recognise that infamous cult leader. My friend Meg is an artist and she is available for commission. She makes personalised and quality pieces of art that are digital and also physical sculptures. So if you would like her information, then please get in touch. And I would also just love to say a quick thank you to my good friend Brad for helping me with the sound editing, and my partner in life and best friend Lee for helping me with the music to this podcast and just being super supportive. So thank you very much. If you think you are in a cult or know someone who could be, please use the link at the end of this show to find out information on how to get advice and support. Likewise, if you would like to share your story with me, please get in touch. I would love to hear from you.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.